Hey everybody, and welcome back to Ready Steady Play. Today we're going to be taking to the battlefield to wage a war that has been fought for millennia in the head-to-head, customizable, card-based wargame, Legacy's Allure. In this video, we'll learn all about the game, we'll look at setting up your first game, how to play, and how to escalate after you've learned the basics. If you want to jump straight to the game rules or find something specific, all the sections of this video are linked in the description down below. Just before we dive in, please note that the components in this video are prototypes and not the final versions. I'd like to thank Plutonian Shore Games for sponsoring this video. In Legacy's Allure, cards represent units in an army. Players arrange their armies on either side of a board with hexagonal spaces. They take turns activating the units in their army until each card is resolved. Then, each army refreshes, ready for the next round. The aim is for the attacker to control the yellow central hex in the middle of the board by the end of the 7th round, and for the defender to stop them. The cards in the game are organized into factions. Factions are differentiated by color, and you'll never mix cards from different factions. In the starter set, you'll find cards from the blue Arangard faction and red Gath faction. Factions have many different cards called units, made up of heroes and non-hero cards. In the starter set, you'll find one hero for Arangard, Tristan, and one hero for Gath, Carthul. Heroes also come with their own ability cards and can use neutral item cards as well, which don't belong to any faction. In draft play, the game is played with 2 decks that each contain a number of non-hero units and one hero with their abilities and items. This is called a kingdom. Each game you'll draft an army from your kingdom. The 2 sets of cards in the starter set have been organized into 2 complete kingdoms for you. But as you become familiar with the game and grow your card collection, you can rebuild these decks to better suit the way you like to play. Speaking of play, there are 2 game modes in Legacy's Allure: Blitz and draft play. Blitz is an easy way to get used to the rules and explore the different factions, heroes, and units. In Blitz, the armies are predetermined, so you can get set up and start playing the battle right away. In the Getting Started guide, the deployment will also be chosen for you. Once you have a feel for how the rules work, you can try draft play, which sees both players bringing a pre-constructed kingdom deck and alternate choosing units from their kingdom to deploy and play with. The starter set comes with 2 kingdom decks, one for Arangard and one for Gath, which can be used for draft play or blitz play. I'm going to demonstrate the rules using 2 full armies from the starter set that are suggested for blitz play. Once I've taught you the rules of the game, I'll talk about how you can build your own kingdom deck and set up for draft play. In Blitz, your army has been predetermined. You can play using armies worth 50 gold or 80 gold. We'll learn more about the gold in the draft play rules later. All you need to know now is that a 50 gold army is smaller and a great way to start learning. When you're confident, you can try a full 80 gold army. We'll be learning using the suggested 80 gold armies from the Quick Start Guide, which have also got established deployments. If you're playing the Blitz mode using other suggested armies, then you deploy these in the same manner as the deployment used for draft play. Here's an info button which will guide you to all the Blitz play armies currently available. Now, I've set up Tristan's Arangard army to do battle with Carthul's Gath horde. Each player now rolls a die. The player with the higher number will be the attacker in this game, and the other player will be the defender. Once the armies are deployed, all we need to do is place a blue mana die on each card matching their mana value, and a shield die on each card that starts with shields. We're also going to put a shield die with value 1 on the yellow hex in the center of the table. The first unit to end their turn on the central hex picks up that shield. It's like an extra hit point. And now we're ready to start playing the battle phase. The attacking player will take the first turn, so let's get into the rules. In Legacy's Allure, 2 forces array against one another and fight for control of the battlefield. All the information in the game is open, so there's no hidden information and no luck involved. Dice are used purely to track information. Players will take turns acting with a single unit until they can take no further actions, then the round will end and a new round begins, with all surviving units able to act once again. The game ends at the end of the 7th round. If the attacker controls the central hex, then they win, but if they don't, they lose. The two armies are made up of units that usually include a hero and a selection of non-hero units. On your turn, your unit can take one of three possible actions: move, attack, or activate an ability. We'll learn more about these actions in a moment. First, let's learn how to read the cards. All units, whether they are heroes or non-hero units, have statistics that tell you what that unit is capable of on the battlefield, and the type of role you can expect them to perform. Some units have lots of different powers, and some don't, but they still have a few things in common. The name of the card is seen here at the top. On the bottom left of the card is the unit's power. This determines how much damage this unit deals when it attacks. Next to that is the unit's range. This determines how many hexes away the unit can perform an attack action. Note that when a ranged unit attacks, it deals damage equal to its power. Next is the movement. This determines the number of hexes the unit can move on the battlefield. The last value here on the right is health. A unit starts the battle with this amount of health and cannot exceed it. When a unit suffers damage, it is tracked with a red die. If it suffers a total amount of damage that would match or exceed its health value, it is removed from play. In the center of the card are keywords, activated abilities, and any passive abilities that affect the card. Finally, in the top right is the unit's starting mana, if it has mana. It cannot exceed this mana value during a game. At the very top of the card is its cost in gold. This value is only used during the draft phase, so we'll look at it in more detail later on. It is useful to take note of a unit's gold cost, as it can help you to get a sense of how strong that unit is. The more expensive it is, the more powerful it is. On the back of every card, you'll find text that explains any keywords, activated abilities, and passive abilities in more detail. Hero cards show information very similar to that of non-hero units, but you'll notice that they don't have a gold cost and they have full bleed art with no space for their abilities. This is because the strength of heroes vastly outstrips that of all but the strongest non-hero units. Each hero has a set of abilities that they may use. Additionally, they may be equipped with item cards as well. During the game, hero abilities and items are drafted or predetermined just like unit cards. The cards in play are placed next to the battlefield so that both players can reference them. You might consider these cards as though they are the text area missing from the center of the hero card, each card giving the hero access to new activated abilities, keywords, and passive abilities. Ability cards and item cards have their name at the top and relevant text in the lower half of the card. You'll see that ability cards also have the name of the hero across the center. Only this hero can use this card. Item cards do not have this text because they're neutral and can be used by any hero, but instead have an inventory value seen here on the center right. Each hero can only have item cards with a total inventory value of 3 or less. In the top right, you'll see that each ability card and item card has a gold cost. If you add up the value of a hero's cards, this can be used as a rough indication of just how powerful a hero is. Now that we understand how to read the cards, let's take another look at the actions. On your turn, you may act with a card to take one of 3 possible actions: move, attack, or activate an ability. Once a card is acted, it is usually exhausted until it refreshes at the end of the round. An exhausted card is turned sideways to the right to show that it cannot take another action this round. Occasionally, card text will refer to a card's turn. This refers to the turn in which you choose to act with that card. Where actions are concerned, hero and non-hero units perform actions in the exact same way. As we go through these actions, we're also going to cover a few keywords that alter the way in which the action works. First, let's look at move. When a unit takes the move action, it can move a number of hexes up to its movement value. A unit cannot move through other units. Some units have the keyword allied pathing. This allows them to move through allied units. Some units have the keyword pathing, which means they move through all other units. Flying works in a very similar way to pathing. It allows units to move through all other units. Imagine the unit taking off and landing again at the end of its movement action. You may wonder, what is the difference between pathing and flying? Well, it's mostly thematic, but there may be a few card interactions for you to discover where it's important. Now that we understand how units move, let's take a look at attacking. A unit carries out an attack action to damage and possibly defeat an enemy unit. Units that only have a power value perform melee attacks, while units with a range and power perform ranged attacks, and they cannot perform melee attacks. Units without a power value cannot attack. When a ranged unit attacks, it chooses an enemy unit that is a number of hexes away equal to or less than the attacking unit's range value. That target suffers damage equal to the attacking unit's power. There is no retaliation during a ranged attack. When performing a melee attack, the attacking unit must be adjacent to the target. The attacking unit will attempt to enter the target unit's space and must have a point of movement available in order to do so. It will deal damage to the target equal to its power. If this is sufficient to defeat the target, then it's removed from the board, and the attacking unit ends the action in the target's space. However, if the damage is insufficient to defeat the target, then place a red die on the target unit. This is the damage it suffered from the attack. When the target unit survives a melee attack, it retaliates, dealing damage equal to its power to the attacking unit. If this defeats the attacking unit, remove it from the board. If the attacking unit is not defeated, then it remains in its original space. Although ranged units cannot perform a melee attack, if they are attacked by a melee unit, then they will still retaliate, dealing damage equal to their power. The keyword charging allows a unit to perform an attack action and move action together. Both of these actions follow the same restrictions for the move and attack actions which we've just learned. It is important to remember that the attacking unit must complete its move with 1 point of movement left to attack into the space of the target unit. Here we see the knight move 2 spaces to reach the grunt, and use its 3rd point of movement to attack into the grunt's space, defeating it. Some units may combine 2 keywords, like the crag wyvern, which has both flying and charging. The crag wyvern must complete its movement with 1 point left in order to land and attack the swordsman. It cannot attack the longbow archer because it cannot complete the movement with enough movement left in order to attack. So that covers attacking. Let's take a look at active abilities. Active abilities may be found on non-hero units and hero ability cards, and may or may not cost mana. Using an active ability is an action and will exhaust the unit unless otherwise stated. Abilities for heroes appear on ability cards, while abilities for units appear in the ability box on the unit card. Abilities are always laid out in the same way, with a possible mana cost or cast range followed by ability text. However, on a non-hero unit card, there will always be a thematic name followed by a dash preceding any potential cost or range. On the hero card, this is missing because the name of the card is the name of the ability. Sometimes the ability does not have a cost or a cast range. The active ability always has the text below the name explaining the ability effect. If necessary, there may be additional explanation of the ability effect on the back of the card. When you see a mana cost, you must reduce the unit's mana by that amount in order to use the ability. If the unit does not possess enough mana, they cannot use the ability. When an ability has a range, this is called a cast range. Note that the cast range on the active ability is distinct from the attack range. The attack range is never used for active abilities. Some abilities specify a range condition, and others can be used to target anything on the battlefield. Whatever the range, it will be detailed in the active ability. You may see the word combinable on an active ability. Combinable means that the unit may combine the active ability with a move action up to their movement value, before or after they use the active ability. Now that you understand how actions work, let's talk about the end of the round, and when you might not want to take an action. The round ends when all cards are exhausted. If this was the 7th round, end the game and check the victory condition. If this was not the 7th round, all cards are refreshed and a new round begins. In the first round of the battle phase, the attacker will take the first turn. In subsequent rounds, the player who did not act last will take the first turn. It can be very important strategically to take the first turn, so you may want to skip actions. As we near the end of a round, each player has 2 cards remaining that are not exhausted. The Avant-Garde player acts by moving their swordsman. Acting just means taking an action with one of their cards. The Gath player decides that playing first next round is worth more than acting with either of their remaining cards, and chooses to skip. When they skip, they pick one of their unexhausted units and exhaust it. The Avant-Garde player decides that skipping would not benefit them, and moves their longbow archer. The Gath player did not expect the archer to move, and could move their grunt to be adjacent to it. But if they do, they will have acted last, and the Avant-Garde player will have the first turn next round. They decide to skip again, so that they may play first next round. I hope that was the right choice. Congratulations! You now understand all the fundamental rules you need to play the Blitz game. Now I'm going to cover a few extra keywords and concepts that may come up. You're welcome to skip this for now and come back later if you're raring to start playing. In this section, I'm going to briefly cover a few things that may come up in your games. Damage types, modifiers, buffs and debuffs, the keyword burn, and the phrase +1 action. There are 3 damage types in Legacy's Allure: physical damage, magical damage, and pure damage. Physical damage is dealt during combat and whenever another type is not specified. It is reduced by armor. Magical damage is typically dealt by abilities and is also dealt by units with the keyword imbued. These units cannot choose to deal physical damage. Magical damage is reduced by magic resist. Pure damage is dealt when specified. It is guaranteed damage that cannot be reduced by any effect. Modifiers are typically seen in abilities and on item cards. The format of the modifier will determine how it's applied. Where the modifier includes a mathematical symbol, this increases or decreases the affected statistic or keyword by the indicated amount. For example, the Grand Wizard decreases the power statistic of a unit by 2 for a round, while the Tactician increases it by 1 for a round. For example, the Tactician can use their Tactics ability to increase the power of the Spellbreaker to 4. If the target does not have that statistic, it cannot be modified. Neither the Tactician's Tactics ability nor the Grand Wizard's Diminish ability can affect the Priest, because the Priest has no power. Where the modifier does not have a mathematical symbol, as we see here on the Spellbreaker's Magical Shield ability, this can provide a new property to the target. The Spellbreaker can give the Tactician or the Priest Magic Resist 3. They could also use this ability on themselves, but there would be no effect because they already have Magic Resist 3. Buffs and debuffs are effects that are placed on units. Typically, buffs are placed by allied units and debuffs by enemy units. They are usually tracked using dice, and may be removed using certain abilities. Note that damage, mana, and exhaustion are not buffs or debuffs. Burn is a keyword that inflicts a debuff on an enemy unit, which deals magical damage over multiple rounds. When a unit suffers from a burn, place a yellow die equal to the value following the keyword. At the beginning of each round, all units suffering from burn take damage equal to the die face. Then the value of the die is reduced by 1. If it would be reduced to 0, remove it. The term +1 action means that this action does not cause the card to exhaust at the end of the turn. Simply don't turn it to the right, and just leave it facing forward. The unit will be able to act again before the end of the round. Now that you know the rules of the game, you understand how to read cards and carry out actions, let's look at the rules for the draft phase in draft play. In draft play, a game has 2 phases, the draft phase and the battle phase. The battle phase is carried out in the same way as it is in Blitz play. So in this section we're going to look at the draft phase, and in order to do that we need to talk about kingdoms. In draft play, each player builds a kingdom deck. This is done before the game begins. The cards in your kingdom deck are not secret, and your opponent may ask to see them. There are only 3 restrictions when building your kingdom deck. The total gold value of all the cards in your deck must match an agreed amount. 120 and 160 are common gold amounts for this format of play. All your cards must come from the same faction or be neutral items. Note that faction cards are all the same color. Your kingdom can only include 1 hero. Heroes are free, so there's no reason not to take one. But consider that you don't need to take all of their abilities in your kingdom. It's nice to have access to all of these options, but they all cost gold, and you're probably not going to draft them all, right? That's the starting challenge of building a kingdom. As you become more familiar with the cards, you'll surely see many different combinations you could do. There are currently 6 heroes and 3 factions available for Legacy's Allure. Arengard with Tristan and Aurelia, Gath with Carthul and Argog, and Sylvan with Anwen and Caladrix. Once you've settled on your selection, it's on to the drafting phase. In draft play, the game begins with each player rolling a 6-sided die. The higher roll will be the attacker in this game, and the other player will be the defender. Each player will deploy their cards into the 2 rows of the board closest to them. This will be rows 1 and 2, or 6 and 7. Each player will draft 80 gold worth of cards from their kingdom deck. Note that the only restriction during this draft is the number of item cards your hero can carry. Each item has an inventory value, and each hero can only have item cards with a total inventory value of 3 or less. The attacker begins by choosing any number of cards with a gold value up to 80 and deploys them into their 2 rows. If any of the cards are hero abilities or items, place them nearby where both players can see them. The defender then chooses cards with a total gold value that matches or exceeds the value of the attacker's cards and deploys them in the same manner on their side of the board. Players take turns choosing cards in this way until both have cards with a total cost of 80, or they announce that their army is complete. Note that if one player decides that their army is complete before reaching the 80 gold cap, the other player can still fill out their units until they reach the 80 gold cap. Once the draft is finished, place a blue die on each unit with mana to track their mana, and a white die on each unit with a shield value to represent their shields. Place a shield die with value 1 in the central hex. This die is a +1 shield modifier for the first unit to end their turn in that space. Now, the battle phase is ready to begin, and the attacker acts first. The last thing I want to mention is when you're feeling very confident, you can try the official competitive rules. The only difference between this and draft play is that you'll play with a chess clock. Each player has 25 minutes. This form of play is clock move, which means that you can consider your actions as much as you like, but once you hit the clock and pass the timer over to your opponent, your move is locked in. Now you know everything you need to know to play Legacy's Allure. I wish you all the best in your future conflicts, and if you'd like to see the game in action, you can find a full game between myself and my buddy Chris on Ready Steady Play. Thanks for watching.